Hi there, thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Molly, I'm the maker behind Lefty Knits, and I am a crafter based in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live with my boyfriend and my cat Lola, and this channel is just a place where I share all of my recent crafty makes and inspirations, mostly of the knitting variety. Today is the last video of my series on one-skein gift ideas. This one is super bulky and bulky weight ideas, and this one's obviously a little bit harder because single skeins of bulky and super bulky yarn are not very generous when it comes to yardage. Obviously your yard of yarn goes much farther than it does for a fingering weight yarn, for example, but it's still a little bit harder to find patterns that fall into the single skein arena. I don't use too much bulky or super bulky yarn. I've worked a decent amount, at least not anymore. I've worked a decent amount with Woolies Thick and Quick, which comes in, I want to say like 200-ish gram balls, maybe bigger. I don't know, but often you are getting more than 100 grams in a single skein of especially super bulky yarn, but I'm gonna try to keep it to about 1. I'll talk about the recommended yarns a little bit more this time. I personally find that yardage seems to differ a lot more from yarn to yarn when it comes to bulky and super bulky yarns. I think that probably has a lot to do with the different yarn constructions used, exactly how thick it is. It just doesn't seem quite as standardized to me. But again, I don't use too much yarn that's that bulky. I live somewhere pretty temperate now, so it's just not as practical for me to use. But I do have some ideas. I'll be mixing bulky and super bulky yarns throughout. I will talk about the yarns in question, and I hope that this gives you some inspiration for things that you might want to do with that single skein to give to a knitworthy person in your life. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about some patterns. The first pattern I'll talk about are the Cozy and Lazy Mitts by Svetlana Volkova. This is a paid pattern. It's $4. And it is written for a bulky weight yarn, Rowan Cocoon, which has a yardage of 126 yards per 100 grams. The gauge given for this is 16 stitches and 22 rows for a 4-inch square, so it's possible you could maybe get an Aran weight yarn to work for this as well. This is a very simple fingerless mitt pattern. It's written in stockinette with a ribbed cuff and top of the hand, so it would be very easy knitting. As written, it takes 70 to 120 yards of yarn, and it comes in a bunch of different sizes from 2XS to XL for a palm circumference between 5.9 and 8.4 inches. So that would fit a pretty wide range of people. That might even go down to like a child's hand, but as someone who is not a parent, I don't have like a super good grasp on how big kids are, but that is a good range, and I think that these mitts could work for a lot of different types of people. Next, I have 2 different cowl ideas. The first one is the Copper Foxes Super Bulky Cowl by Casey Herlihy. This is a pattern that I actually test knit. I used Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick when I tested this. And this pattern is $7 on Ravelry. The gauge for this is 8.5 stitches and 12 rows for 4 inches in the lace pattern. And this is just a bulky version of a, I believe, fingering weight cowl that she had previously released. I found this to be an extremely quick knit. It took me, I don't know, like a couple hours tops of not super seriously focused knitting to finish. So it's definitely something that you would be able to make pretty easily. And I think it would be a good lace pattern for beginners because it knits up very fast. And even if you make a mistake, which, you know, it's not a hard lace pattern, but even if you were to make a mistake, it's not like it takes that much longer for you to get back to where you were. This one takes approximately 84 to 100 yards of yarn, and it was written with Malabrigo Rasta in mind. That is a super bulky yarn, and 1 skein of that is 150 grams, so more than 100, but still a single skein, and that's 90 yards for within those 150 grams. I like this pattern. I really enjoy Casey's patterns in general, and I've worked with quite a few of her patterns in the past. I think she's a great designer, so I would definitely recommend this one if you have some super bulky yarn lying around and you want to make a super warm cowl. The next cowl I have is Iord by Andrea Witt. It is a bulky weight cowl. It's $6 US, and it is a simple stockinette cowl with a little twist, which is that it's written with a folded collar that you can put an I-cord drawstring in to tighten it up for additional warmth. The gauge of this is 15 stitches in 23 rows, is 4 inches, and it takes 130 to 140 yards of yarn. The recommended yarn for this is Malabrigo Mecha, which is a bulky weight. It is 130 yards per 100 grams. So this is intended to use essentially an entire skein of that yarn. Luckily, I think this one would be easy to make sure that you don't go over a skein because it's just like 90% stockinette knitting. If you omit a few rows, it's not like you're going to be disrupting a stitch pattern. And if you wanted that single skein to go a tiny bit farther in terms of your rows of the cowl, you could use a contrasting color for the I-cord. And I think you could probably use most weights of yarn for the I-cord without much of an issue. So that's something that you could consider if you want to use up some of your scraps and maybe add a little bit more visual interest to this cowl. I have one hat pattern that I will talk about, and that is the super bulky hat by Ashley Kaiser of Sorella Yarns. This is written, as the name suggests, for super bulky yarns, and it's no surprise, given that she is a very well-established dyer, that this is written with Sorella's yarns in mind. So the suggested yarn for this is her own super bulky yarn, which is 76 yards per 100 grams. This pattern, which is available from newborn to adult large, uses between 30 and 106 yards of yarn, so the biggest sizes would probably use a bit more than a single skein. The gauge of this is 10 stitches and 18 rows over a 4-inch square of stockinette, and this is just a nice basic stockinette hat pattern for super bulky yarn. You could add a folded brim or a pom-pom, depending on the size of hat you were looking for and how much yarn you had to use. You could even add a contrasting pom-pom if you wanted to add a little bit more color to your hat. The possibilities are definitely pretty wide for a hat like this. I've mostly stayed away from talking about sock patterns throughout this video series, but I will talk about one slipper pattern here. And that's the Family Slippers by Church Mouse Yarns and Tees. And this is a free pattern for a slipper that has a garter stitch heel and a ribbed toe. And it's knit using Lamb's Pride worsted yarn held double. So with that in mind, it says it would use 150 to 300 yards of yarn. So if you're using a different yarn that you're not holding double, you might be able to make it go a little bit farther. That said, the gauge for this, probably because it's meant to have the ability to hold its shape somewhat by itself, is 16 stitches equals 4 inches in garter. And it comes in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large, with foot lengths from 8.5 to 11.5 inches. Although I think this would be pretty easy to adjust for different foot lengths, and given the pictures, I believe that it would fit children and adults. I just think these look very cozy. They look like they would knit up really quickly, and if you had some bulky yarn laying around or some worsted weight yarn that you really just wanted to use up quickly and you had enough to hold it double, or 2 different worsted weight yarns tomorrow, this could be a good idea. The last pattern I'll talk about is a little holiday one. That's the Star Ornament by Adela Dutra, and this is a mega quick pattern. It only uses 20 yards of yarn. It's meant for super bulky yarn. The recommended yarn is Lion Brand Collection 50/50, which is a super bulky, man, wool alpaca blend. It says that this yarn has 87 yards per 200 grams, so that is like bulky. But I don't think that that is of particular importance here. Like, you're just knitting this little star pattern, and perhaps your yardage would be a little bit different if you were doing a different type of yarn, but it seems like this would be very easy It could be good to attach to a gift, to give to somebody as an ornament. Maybe you could make a set or a garland if you were feeling like you're ready to make a lot of these stars. I think the possibilities of what you could do with these stars is pretty endless, and it would be a great way to just use up any bulkier yarn that you have in your stash and kind of add a little personal touch maybe to a non-handmade gift if that's something that you are looking to do. With that, I am finished with my single skein gift ideas series. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot of inspiration out of this. If you have any ideas for gift knitting or any plans, I'd love to hear about them. I'm thinking I might be making a few more gifts than usual this year, so I'm definitely looking for some inspiration myself. Although I think a lot of these patterns might be things you'll see in my future podcast episodes as things that I am knitting for friends and family. If you liked this video, don't forget to click the thumbs up button down below and consider subscribing to my channel. I make videos about knitting at least once a week. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.